It's May of 1964. A freezing English rain is pouring down on an old open-air train station in Manchester, England. The wind is howling through the rusted iron rafters. A crowd of trendy British kids are huddled underneath umbrellas on the platform. They are shivering in the damp cold, wiping the rain from their eyes, waiting for a concert to start. Suddenly, the crowd goes quiet. A horse-drawn carriage rolls right down the center of the muddy train platform. Out steps a black woman wrapped in a glamorous, heavy fur coat. She is smiling wide, completely unfazed by the miserable British weather. In her hands, she holds a brilliant white electric guitar. She walks right up to the edge of the platform and plugs directly into a giant amplifier sitting out in the open rain. With the train tracks separating her from the crowd, she unleashes a fierce, loud performance of the song "Didn't It Rain?" Her guitar tone is raw, heavy, and deeply distorted. It cuts through the wind and the rain like a buzzsaw. Sitting in the crowd watching her every move with wide eyes are teenage kids named Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, and Mick Jagger. They're standing there getting soaked, watching this woman show them exactly how to weaponize an electric guitar. They are absorbing the very blueprint of modern rock music right there on a wet train platform. That woman was Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Welcome to Punks Pre-Punk. I'm your host, Andrew Winter. Today, we're going to be talking about an ultimate trailblazer. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was an absolute genius, a radical performer, and a musical insurgent who invented the bedrock of heavy guitar music long before the world was ready for it. I'm going to repeat that one more time. She invented the bedrock of heavy guitar music. In this episode, we're going to find out how a black woman wielding a newly electrified guitar invented the raw, driving guitar licks that built rock and roll a decade before Little Richard, Elvis Presley, or Chuck Berry ever stepped into a studio. We'll look at how she fearlessly navigated a deeply segregated music industry while traveling with her secret lover, Marine Knight. But near the very end of the episode, we're going to reveal the wild story of how she pulled off a giant, highly theatrical secret stunt in 1951, a full year before history books claimed the first rock and roll concert ever happened. It was an enormous, amplified stadium event complete with a fireworks show that completely flipped the music industry on its head, and she did it entirely on her own terms. Mainstream history leaves it out of the textbook credits, and I think you're going to love it. So stick around until the end to find out how she pulled it off. Think punk started in the 70s? Think again. Welcome back to Punks Pre-Punk, where I show you how the rebel attitude, gritty tones, and uncompromising identity of punk rock were blazing a trail long before bands like Death or The Damned. Alright, so imagine you're standing inside the legendary High Society Cotton Club in Harlem, back in the fall of 1938. The room is packed with wealthy, white elite New Yorkers dressed in lavish tuxedos and evening gowns. The atmosphere is thick with jazz, cigarettes, and strict big band decorum. Then the spotlight shifts. Out walks this 23-year-old black woman dressed in a magnificent evening gown, clutching a giant Gibson archtop guitar. She doesn't wait for the orchestra to lead her. She smiles, opens her mouth, and lets loose a booming, raspy, sanctified vocal delivery while her fingers fly across the guitar neck with a ferocious, syncopated rhythm. She starts growling out religious gospel lyrics, but she's swinging the rhythm with the sultry blues-soaked groove that makes the entire room gasp. The church folks back home called it the devil's music. The secular jazz crowd had never heard anything so holy and wild. It was a psychological explosion that completely bridged the sacred and the profane, dropping a sonic bomb right onto the center stage of American entertainment. Act 1. The Miracle from Cotton Plant. To understand how someone develops that level of boundary-pushing artistic courage, you have to look at where Sister Rosetta Tharpe came from. She entered the world in 1915 in the tiny rural town of Cotton Plant, Arkansas, born Rosetta Nubbin. Her parents were cotton pickers, and her father was largely out of the picture. But her mother, Katie Bell Nubbin, was an absolute force of nature. Katie Bell was a fierce preacher, singer, and mandolin player for the Church of God in Christ. Now, this specific Pentecostal denomination was incredibly unique for the time. While mainstream white churches were rigid, quiet, and deeply conservative, the Church of God in Christ was a radical incubator for rhythmic, expressive musical experimentation. They explicitly encouraged shouting, dancing, emotional release, and artistic boundary pushing as a way to praise God. Most importantly, they allowed women to stand up, preach, and lead congregations. Rosetta was a musical prodigy. By the age of 4, she picked up the guitar and mastered it with a terrifying speed. Her mother recognized the girl's otherworldly talent, and by the time Rosetta was just 6 years old, the mother-daughter duo hit the road as a traveling evangelical troupe. Rosetta was billed across the American South as the singing and guitar-playing miracle. So picture this. An incredibly young black girl standing in front of a packed tent revival plays intricate, driving blues and gospel rhythms on an instrument that society dictated was meant strictly for men. From her earliest childhood, Rosetta's bass line was performing on her own terms, commanding rooms and playing music to break through emotional barriers. By the mid-1920s, Rosetta and her mother settled in the south side of Chicago. There, Rosetta was exposed to the booming electric sounds of urban blues and jazz. She absorbed the hot licks, the syncopated boogie-woogie piano patterns, and the deep emotional string bends of the city. But she noticed a frustrating wall. The church authorities told her that blues and jazz were sinful, the music of the devil. Meanwhile, the secular jazz clubs looked down on gospel as old-fashioned. Rosetta looked at both sides and said, "Watch me combine them both." Act 2. The Crossover Insurgency. In 1934, at 19 years old, Rosetta married a preacher named Thomas Tharpe. It was a short, unhappy marriage, but it gave her the stage name she would carry into battle forever: Sister Rosetta Tharpe. By 1938, she had left the marriage, left Chicago behind, and marched straight into the musical capital of the world, New York City. She signed a contract with Decca Records and released her first major tracks, including a song called Rock Me. It was a gospel song, but Rosetta recorded it with a heavy, swinging, driving rhythm that felt entirely new. Music critics listening to it in 1938 were completely stunned, with one prominent writing critic explicitly noting that Rosetta was introducing a whole new style of rock and roll spiritual singing. She saw other successes with hit songs like Strange Things Happening Every Day and her rendition of Down by the Riverside, which was eventually added to the National Recording Registry. Rosetta became an overnight crossover sensation. She was booked at John Hammond's legendary From Spirituals to Swing concert at Carnegie Hall, and she became a regular headliner at the Cotton Club and Cafe Society, sharing the stage with jazz titans like Cab Calloway and Duke Ellington. But her rapid success sparked an immediate, furious backlash. The Orthodox gospel community felt deeply betrayed. They accused Sister Rosetta of selling out her faith to sing holy words in smoky, secular nightclubs where white audiences were getting drunk on alcohol. They called her a hypocrite and an apostate. On the flip side, the male-dominated jazz and pop world didn't know how to handle a woman who could easily play rings around every single male guitarist in the city. She was routinely hit with the ultimate backhanded, sexist compliment of the era. "Wow, she plays guitar like a man!" But the male musicians quickly learned that trying to compete with her was a giant mistake. During one famous caravan tour in the early 1940s, several male guitarists complained about having to open for a woman who sang church songs. They decided they were going to try and outplay her during the nightly jam sessions. They wanted to put her in her place. When it was Rosetta's turn to take the stage, she didn't just play her songs. She walked right out into the front of the platform, looked the lead male guitarist dead in the eye, and launched into a solo so blindingly fast and complex that the crowd started jumping out of their seats. She started playing the guitar behind her back, then using only one hand to pull off incredibly fast note runs, all while laughing. The male guitarists were so thoroughly embarrassed that one of them allegedly packed up his instrument before the show was even over and walked out the back door. Rosetta didn't look for validation from the establishment. She simply picked up her instrument, stepped up to the microphone, and let her music deliver the eviction notice to their preconceptions. Act 3. Midnight on the Chitlin Circuit. By the late 1940s, a massive technological shift happened. The electric guitar arrived, and the second Sister Rosetta Tharpe plugged her instrument into a hard-driven amplified speaker, she unlocked a completely heavy, aggressive sound that changed the universe. She didn't use the amplifier to sound clean and polite. She pushed the volume until the speakers began to naturally break apart, creating a thick, dirty, saturated tone a decade before anyone else. So picture this. It's a bustling Friday night in the late 1940s at the famous Apollo Theater in Harlem. The crowd is packed to the rafters and the energy is pure lightning. The Apollo is notorious for hosting intense guitar battles where the top male guitarists in the country step up to try and humiliate each other with the fastest guitar solos. Sister Rosetta walks out onto the stage holding a gleaming, brand new electric guitar. The male musicians in the wings look at her evening gown and smile, expecting a polite, quiet gospel song. Instead, Rosetta steps up to her amplifier, cranks the volume knob to its absolute max, and delivers a vicious, wind-up arm swing, the exact windmill move that rock stars like Pete Townsend would copy decades later. She slams her pick into the strings, unleashing a wave of crashing, heavily distorted, blazing blues riffs that completely shake the plaster off the theater ceiling. She drops to her knees, shredding a complex, high-velocity solo right at the edge of the stage, staring down the front row. The male guitarists stand frozen in the wings, their jaws on the floor, completely blown out of the water. She didn't just compete in their world, she entirely redefined what the instrument could do. So try to imagine, it is the height of Jim Crow segregation in the American South. Sister Rosetta is touring the country, selling out large auditoriums, but because of the cruel structural racism of the era, she and her band were legally barred from entering white-owned hotels, restaurants, or restrooms. So Rosetta chooses absolute DIY self-reliance. Instead of begging for access to a broken system, she buys a giant, custom-built, luxury long-distance bus equipped with sleeping bunks and kitchen facilities, effectively inventing the very first modern rock and roll sleeper tour bus. When the tour rolls into a heavy segregated southern town, the white promoters try to force her to eat outside in the dirt behind the venue. Rosetta smiles, walks past them, and steps onto her own custom bus. She cooks her own meals, rests in her own bed, and runs her entire operation completely independent of the racist infrastructure. So from her home on wheels, she can step off the bus, walk onto stage, and force the segregated crowd to look up at her as the musical deity she was. But staying on the bus didn't mean she was safe from the hatred outside. One night in rural Alabama, her tour bus was parked in a dark lot outside a segregated venue after a sold-out show. A group of local white supremacists, furious that a black woman was drawing such a huge crowd, surrounded the bus. They started banging on the windows, yelling threats, and trying to shake the vehicle. Her bandmates inside were terrified, whispering about trying to find weapons or slipping out the back. But Rosetta didn't panic, and she certainly didn't hide. She grabbed her heavy acoustic guitar case, walked straight to the front doors of the bus, and threw them wide open. She stood at the top of the steps, looking down at the angry crowd. Instead of yelling back, she simply stared at them with absolute ice-cold defiance. She told them exactly who she was, how much money she had made that night, and told them that if they wanted to stop the music, they were going to have to try it themselves. Her sheer presence and total lack of fear completely broke the crowd's momentum. They realized she wasn't going to cower. Slowly, the group muttered to themselves and disappeared into the night. Rosetta closed the doors, went back to her seat, and told the driver to roll on to the next town. Act 4. The Outlaw Romance. Sister Rosetta Tharpe didn't just break the rules when it came to her own musical style. She lived a life of absolute, uncompromising authenticity in her personal identity. In the mid-1940s, Rosetta crossed paths with a brilliant, smooth-voiced gospel singer named Marie Knight. The two instantly recognized a profound artistic and spiritual chemistry, and they formed a powerhouse touring duo, scoring big hits like Up Above My Head. But their partnership went far deeper than the stage. Rosetta and Marie became romantic lovers. Think about the sheer, terrifying danger of that reality in the 1940s and 50s. They were two black women navigating a deeply racist, segregated country while performing inside highly conservative, strictly religious church environments, while simultaneously sharing an underground queer romance. If the mainstream public or the church elders had found out this truth, it would have instantly ended their careers and put their physical lives in immediate, violent jeopardy. Yet, Rosetta refused to live in a state of compromised fear. She and Marie traveled the country together, lived together, and loved each other right under the noses of the establishment. They wore their independence like armor. When the pressure from the religious community grew too loud or restrictive, Rosetta simply leaned into her secular style, refusing to let any institution dictate who she was allowed to love or how she was allowed to express her soul. Act 5. The Stadium Spectacular. Remember that huge stadium-sized theatrical stunt I teased at the top of the episode? This is the moment where Sister Rosetta showed the world that she was a master of stadium-level rock production a full year before history books claim rock concerts even existed. By 1951, Rosetta was at the absolute peak of her fame, but she was facing a lot of local gossip and pressure regarding her personal life and unconventional lifestyle. The church leaders were breathing down her neck, and the gossip columns were whispering about a relationship with Marie. So, Rosetta decided to answer the critics with a piece of pure, high-stakes guerrilla performance art. She announced that she was getting married to a man named Russell Morrison. She didn't book a quiet, polite neighborhood church either. Instead, Rosetta explicitly rented out the entire Griffith Stadium, the enormous professional baseball stadium in Washington, D.C. She turned her actual wedding into a full-scale, ticketed music festival. Over 20,000 fans bought tickets and packed into the stadium seats. Rosetta walked down the infield aisle in a stunning, elaborate white wedding gown, went through the ceremony right on second base. And the second the vows were completed, she didn't walk away to her reception. She picked up her electric guitar right there on the baseball diamond, plugged into a massive stadium sound system, and unleashed a full-scale, amplified, roaring rock and roll concert while wearing her wedding dress. She tore through her hits, shredding solos from the pitcher's mound, and capped the entire night off with a brilliant fireworks display over the stadium. It was loud, it was flamboyant, it was deeply commercial, and it completely dismantled the boundary between a private sacred ritual and an amplified stadium rock show. She took the ultimate conservative social institution, turned it into a rock concert, and charged admission for it. Act 6. The Final Piece. As the late 1950s and 60s rolled in, mainstream American radio began to heavily prioritize white male artists like Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Bill Haley. The industry took the very rhythms, the guitar distortions, and the showmanship that Sister Rosetta Tharpe had spent decades inventing and packaged them into a segregated media system that routinely pushed black creators, especially black women, straight out of the credits. Mainstream American audiences began to view Rosetta as an old-school novelty act, completely blind to the fact that icons like Chuck Berry had explicitly stated that their entire careers were just an impersonation of Sister Rosetta Tharpe. But Rosetta didn't stop rocking. When America turned its back, she took her talents to Europe, where she was treated like the absolute royalty she was. She toured continuously, jumping around the stage and defying her early onset severe diabetes. In 1970, while touring in Switzerland, she suffered a severe stroke. The heavy complications multiplied, and she eventually had to have one of her legs amputated. For most musicians, that would be the absolute end of the road. But this woman was rock and roll to her very marrow. In 1971, just a short time after her major surgery, Sister Rosetta Tharpe rolled right into the Gates of Prayer Church in New York City, stood up on her remaining leg, and sang her heart out alongside her lifelong partner, Marie Knight. She passed away in 1973 following another stroke, just before she was scheduled to enter the recording studio. She was buried in an unmarked grave in Philadelphia, largely forgotten by the mainstream music industry she single-handedly built. But you cannot erase a fire that bright. In the decades since, her legacy has risen from the ashes, culminating in her long overdue induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Sister Rosetta Tharpe didn't fit into any of the safe boxes society built for her. She was too loud for the church, too holy for the jazz clubs, too brilliant for the sexist guitar scene, and too authentic for the segregated world. But she had the pure, unfiltered essence of true punk rock. The courage to crank the volume, distort the message, and look a conservative establishment directly in the eye while showing them exactly who owns the future. So next time you plug in an electric instrument, hear a heavy, distorted guitar solo, or watch a performer swing their arm in a wild windmill smash, just remember a black woman in an evening gown standing on a wet train platform in Manchester, changing the course of human music forever. Now, if you want to dive deeper into the gritty, unfiltered history of Sister Rosetta Tharpe, the books and documentaries I relied on in this episode, including Gail Wild's brilliant biography, Shout Sister Shout, are listed right now in the show notes. Please go check them out. Thanks again for listening to Punk's Pre-Punk. If this story lit a little bit of that rebel fire in your chest today, please do all the podcast stuff. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share this track with someone who needs a reminder that the status quo is meant to be broken. Next week, we're heading into the fiery, chaotic landscape of the 19th century to talk about a man who wore a long gray beard, carried a broadsword, and decided that the only way to preach true human equality was to launch a full-scale guerrilla warfare raid on a federal armory. I'm talking about the ultimate militant abolitionist underdog, John Brown. Until next time, keep blowing out the speakers and keep punk rocking the boat.